Good afternoon. Our technical difficulty remains, but we will be doing roll call votes today versus our online voting machine, so it may take just a little bit longer than normal. I'll start off with roll call. Commissioner Alexander. Present. Commissioner Brown. Present. Commissioner Flick, present. Commissioner Jordan.
Present.
Commissioner Joshi Gupta.
Present.
Commissioner Lund. Present. Commissioner Stieg.
Here.
Commissioner Stewart.
Present.
Commissioner Witry.
Present.
Thank you. First order of business is approval of the meeting minutes from the May 23rd CPC meeting. Looking for a motion.
Meeting minutes from the May 23rd meeting.
Commissioner Witry made a motion for approval. Second.
Second.
I'll second the motion. Seconded by Commissioner Alexander. If there's no discussion, we'll call the question. Commissioner Alexander? Yes. Commissioner Brown?
Yes.
Commissioner Flick? Yes. Commissioner Jordan?
Yes.
Commissioner Joshi Gupta? Commissioner Lund?
Yes.
Commissioner Stieg?
Yes.
Commissioner Stewart?
Yes.
Commissioner Witry?
Yes.
Great. This is just like COVID online meetings. I'll start with the reading of the hearing rules. The City Planning Commission has established certain rules governing the procedures to be followed at public hearings. Before speaking, each person shall give their name, address, and state whom he or she is representing. Proponents for the proposal will speak first for a period of 10 minutes. Each speaker shall be allowed a maximum of 2 minutes. Opponents or other interested parties will speak second for a period of 15 minutes. Each speaker shall be allowed a maximum of 2 minutes. Proponents will be allowed a period of 6 minutes for rebuttal. Each speaker shall be allowed a maximum of 2 minutes. Opponents will not be allowed to rebut. No material, written matter, photographs, maps, etc., will be accepted by the commission or its staff at any time during this public hearing. This procedure shall be followed except at such time when the presiding officer shall, with the approval of the commission members present, extend such time. And with that, we'll start with our first docket, zoning docket 3923.
Chair, I would just like to thank you for your time as carrying us through COVID and being the chairwoman of CPC over the last 2 years and taking on another year than was asked of you. So I just want to thank you for all of your time, your leadership, for serving the city of New Orleans. And we just really appreciate everything.
Thank you so much. This is my last meeting as chair for context. Thank you. I appreciate that. Zoning docket 3923.
Zoning docket 3923 is a petition for a conditional use to permit a hotel in an HMMU historic Marigny Treme Bywater mixed use district. The property is located at 901 Bartholomew Street and 4015 Burgundy Street. The applicant proposes to convert what is currently operating as a commercial real estate space into a five-suite hotel entirely contained on the second floor. The project consists of a 2-story building with 14,710 square feet and parking in a parking lot with 20 spaces. The building sits on a corner lot with frontage on Bartholomew Street, and the applicant is proposing to renovate the second floor to facilitate this project. The conditional use only applies to the second floor, and the first floor will be utilized as an unspecified commercial space. At the previous meeting, commission meeting, staff recommended approval of zoning docket 039-23 subject to 3 provisos. There was concern about the usage of the first floor, and the applicant was asked to provide plans to show the use and where the lobby would be. Those plans have been provided to the commission. Staff still recommends approval subject to 3 provisos.
Thank you. I have a few cards. First card is Paul Mayron.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Paul Marone on behalf of the petitioner, Bywater, JEJ LLC. As you all are aware, this matter was heard at your last meeting at some length. So I won't go over a lot of the details, but just to touch on a few of the major points. We have submitted, as staff noted, the plans for the first floor, which shows the location of the lobby, how that lobby will interface with the units on the second floor. You'll also notice that there is a desk on the first floor, a check-in desk. Your ordinances require that we have 24-hour personnel full-time at that desk. We intend to comply with that, and we'll have personnel at that desk. As I said last time, I believe respectfully that this is a relatively benign use of the 5 units on the second floor. These uses are, in our estimation, generally less impactful and less intense than maybe some of the other uses that have been on this site historically, or even some of the uses that might be allowed under the existing zoning. So for these reasons, we would respectfully request your approval. Staff noted in their comments that there is nothing incompatible or inconsistent with our request and your master plan. So I would point that out. Furthermore, the analysis in the staff report also suggests there are no inconsistencies with your ordinances and regulations, and we are in compliance with those, subject to your discretion on the conditional use for the units on the second floor. With that all being said, we would respectfully request your approval. We'll be happy to answer any questions that the commissioners might have at the appropriate time. It's our belief that this will help us bring this building back into commerce, which we think is important to the area and we think will be a benefit for the area. So we appreciate your consideration this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a few cards in opposition. Chuck Berg. Mr. Berg, please state your name and address and you'll have 2 minutes.
My name is Charles Berg, and I'm a resident at 900 Bartholomew across the street. We're trying to gain more understanding of the proposed project. And as such, we still don't understand how the lobby works and how some of the functions of this hotel will work. We don't see any staffing areas. We don't know what goes on with garbage pickup and maintenance of the project, as well as security. So we would like to address those issues. And we have a few other speakers who want to
Okay.
talk as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Eleanor Graham.
Just heard from Mr. Berg, who's an architect, and he's been an architect in historic districts for decades. And when asked to see the revised plans, they were not provided to him directly. He never really saw whatever it is you were viewing. I can also tell you that you had expected this developer to cooperate with the neighbors. We have heard nothing directly from Mr. Ward, who is the principal of this entity that proposes the hotel. Believe the staff is misguided here. HUMU should be consistent with an historic residential district based on what has been applied in the MU district as we sit today, not in isolation. What this commission approved, catty corner across the street, are 10 vacation homes that occupy an entire half block and provide commercial short-term rental for up to 50 residents at a time. What this commission approved by the same developer across the street is a condominium building with 75 units. Now, arguably, illegally, there are 35 plus short-term rentals where your own staff said there should be 17 under the 25% rule, and safety and permits can't make their head, you can't figure it all out, okay, to enforce it. So this is what's going on. Behind them is a legitimate bed and breakfast, the Maison Inn. It is surrounded by cottages, many of which are legitimate homes. The Bywater is inundated with transient rental units. It is under huge amount of pressure. And I'm going to urge you, as someone who used to enforce for this commission, and also for the city's Department of Safety and Permits as a deputy city attorney, to reject this proposal. Do not consider staff isolated recommendations based on something allegedly consistent with the master plan and isolation as an isolated use. You have to look at impact. Has there been an impact study? No. Are we in dire straits in the Bywater? We're trying to enforce short-term rentals. Yes. Do we need this hotel? No. Mr. Yeager around the corner has got a large hotel you just approved, and there's a legitimate hotel fronting Charter Street going up.
Ms. Graham, your
80,
time.
3 blocks away. Thank you. Both sides, 3 blocks away. Thank you.
Linda Murphy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Linda Murphy. I reside at 900 Bartholomew Street, which is directly across from the proposed hotel. What I would like to say is I am very, very much opposed to this plan. We experience in Saxony that there are so many, as Eleanor was saying, 45 short-term rental units. And I understand that there's 17 that should be legal. So that's the first thing. My feeling is that because of that situation with the short-term rentals in our place, owned by the company that we're talking about today, we don't see any reason why the hotel would not turn into STRs. And as Eleanor said, we are inundated with STRs in our neighborhood. It's a historic neighborhood. We want to keep it that way. And I also am worried about property values. We came in and we paid a decent price for our apartment. We love it. We want to stay there. But if all these STRs come in, the crime increases, no garbage pickup, and so on, it's going to turn into a very bad area, and then we'll have to leave. So I love where I live, and I thank you for the consideration, and I oppose it.
Thank you. My last card in opposition is for Peter Murphy.
Good afternoon, Peter Murphy. I also live in 900 Bartholomew. I can't do anything but echo the comments that my neighbors have said already. You don't need another boutique hotel in the Bywater. There's a boutique hotel that opened up across from the Joint. You have Mr. Yeager's new hotel up the block from us. This could, in essence, put a concentration of at least 100 or more than 100 transient visitors in that one corner. Why can't this building be converted to residential for people actually to live in, with all the STRs that are coming and the conversions of apartment buildings to STRs? This city and this neighborhood has a shortage of residential housing. What do we need more short-term rental or boutique house for? Why don't we just create residential apartments for maybe the middle class to move in and make something out of this neighborhood instead of just another Epcot? We don't need this. And when I hear something saying that this is a good use of the property, it's not. It's good use for the developer, but in the building I live in was a good use for the developer too. It's an STR hotel. Not at all what was presented to us when we bought, but now that we're in. So I do not trust one lick that this developer will not do anything but turn it into another STR hotel. And this is ruining this neighborhood, and everybody on this commission knows that it's ruining the city of New Orleans too. This is an opportunity to stop it. Give it some thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marion, you have some time to rebut.
Thank you. Just a few comments. With regards to the use, I mean, this is not residential property. I mean, it's a mixed use property. So to suggest, well, we should just make this residential, I mean, it's not here. We're not here asking to change the zoning. We're simply asking for conditional use under the existing zoning. So it's unreasonable in my estimation to suggest, well, we really think you should have something else there. So go in and change the zoning and make it residential. We are where we are. With regards to some of the complaints, it's similar to what you heard at the end of May. And those complaints really are about issues that certain people have at the Saxony across the street. What we're talking about here is a commercial building, a building that was historically used as a 5th District police station. We're only proposing 5 units on the 2nd floor. To suggest that 5 units on the 2nd floor is going to be detrimental to this entire area, affect property values in a negative way. I understand the concern, but respectfully, I disagree with that. I just don't believe that that is the case. I believe this is a very benign use. This is a very limited use, and it's a use in a commercial building that is not inconsistent with what is in the area, but I think it's compatible with what's in the area. Your staff believes that. Your staff has a very lengthy report that goes through a number of criteria and a very good analysis. And at the end of the day, I believe the staff report stands on its own 2 feet. And they have recommended approval, and we urge you to consider that staff report when you make your decision today. With regards to Mr. Burke, the staffing, your ordinance requires us to have full-time staffing, and we intend to comply with that. We're not asking for any waivers or variances of those provisions. As far as garbage pickup, we have ample room, as you know, and if you look at the plans, this is an L-shaped property of a parking lot in the back. We have more than adequate room to address the garbage in accordance with your ordinances. We are not requesting any variances or waivers of that item. With regards to security, it is not our intent to have full-time security on site at this point in time, but obviously that's something that we're going to address as is needed as the project moves forward. We're concerned about security. We're concerned about security not only of those that might be in this building, but also in the area in general. So we'd like to have the opportunity to know what our project is going to be before we can make a final decision on security. But I echo the concerns of some of the speakers here this afternoon. We hear those concerns, we share those concerns, and we intend to be responsive to them as this project moves forward. At the end of the day, we've got a commercial building that we're very much trying to get back into commerce. This would help us. We do not believe that it would have any negative impact, these 5 units on the second floor. And we respectfully request your approval. And we again urge you to consider strongly your staff's analysis of our request this afternoon. And we thank you for your time.
Thank you. That concludes our public portion. Are there any questions for staff or the applicant?
Question for staff, without the conditional use, what are the other possibilities for this building as it stands? It's just because the applicant mentioned, you know, we are where we are with the zoning, and that's not the request here. And while nothing is being asked as far as zoning, I would like to know what the other possibilities are without any granting permission.
There are quite a lot of uses that are permitted
Okay.
in this district.
That's-
So I can briefly run through.
Yeah,
some
I
of
mean,
them.
just sort of a, you know, a theme would be nice, just a few, just like. Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So let's see, bed and breakfast, principal and accessory. This is what's in the ordinance. This is not what's in the IZD
Sure.
that's in place right now.
Okay,
Um,
I got it.
Daycare homes, small and large are permitted, dwellings above the ground floor, single family, 2-family, townhouse, multifamily, small multifamily affordable, group homes, small and large, home-based childcare, small and large, permanent supportive housing, short-term rental, large and small again, and that's what's in, that's not ICD.
That's not the, without the ICD, okay.
Amusement facility, indoor, animal hospital, art gallery, art studio, bars, conditional use, car wash is a conditional use, catering kitchen permitted, childcare center, small and large, daycare centers, financial institutions, grocery store, gas stations, a conditional use, funeral homes, conditional use, hostel, hotel, motel are conditional uses.
Okay, well, that's okay. I don't, the conditional uses, I'm not as.
Just the permitted by right.
Just permitted by right. So-
Microbrewery, micro distillery are permitted by right. Motor vehicle dealership, small, office, personal service establishment, public market, recording studio, carryout restaurant, specialty restaurant, standard restaurant, retail goods establishment,
Okay,
small box variety store, winery, brewery, distillery, community center, convent, monastery, education facility, social club, place of worship, government offices. There's a lot of uses.
sure, I get it. But are any of those, if this conditional use were to be granted, inconsistent with that, I mean, anything permitted on the ground floor could be compatible with the conditional use if granted on the second floor, or is it one or the other? So I think that retail is that the proposal that there be retail on the bottom, or is
So-
that just the lobby?
So if anything is permitted in that
Mhm.
zoning district, it could
It
be
could be,
on
it
the
could be on
ground
the ground
floor.
floor. So you
I'm
can
not
have
sure
both.
if there is a proviso, but typically if
Right,
typically there's a proviso that states that the conditional use is specific to a specific floor, if that's what had been proposed. I'm not sure if that was part of the proviso or not.
okay, thanks. I'm sorry that took so much time. Okay.
Any other questions?
I have a question for the applicant, please. If the staff can pull up the slide for the ground, the first floor.
Sorry, was that to me?
Yes,
I'm
No,
sorry,
I'm
could you-
sorry, I'm asking the staff. I have a bad throat.
Okay.
so You have to forgive me today. I'm asking for the first floor plans. to be put up.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Just to save time, I know I asked you last time to provide plans for the first floor lobby. I'm trying to understand how the lobby is going to work. There is a check-in desk as far as I can see. I'm just wondering, how will that person be sitting there? Is there a bathroom? Is there a closet, for cleaning? Is there some sort of, somehow it doesn't seem as if it was a developed lobby.
Yes, so the lobby is, as you see on the plans, with the main access being off of Bartholomew. As you come in, there is going to be a desk there. That will be the check-in desk. It will be manned. There'll be access from that point to the stairs, which are immediately adjacent to it, as well as to the elevator, which is immediately behind it, that would then give access to the second floor. There will be access to a bathroom and to an office area. There will be bathrooms that will be general on the first floor, and the employees will have access to those bathroom facilities throughout the first floor with some of the other uses that are there.
The purpose of asking about a lobby and check-in and having a person on site is just so that you establish yourself as a hotel.
Yes.
And to make sure that people who are living upstairs are actually following the rules of the hotel. So I'm just having trouble being convinced by this layout. I wish it was a little bit more convincing and had actually a hotel feel, like a hotel lobby. Even if unit D had been taken up to create some sort of a lobby and check-in desk or something, I feel like it would have been much more believable.
Well, I understand your concern. Obviously, it's a lobby for 4 units or 5 units is different than a 100 unit, obviously. So it is scaled down. But we think we have more than enough access area to perform the functions and to have the full-time employee there, which we know we're required by your ordinances to have and which we intend to have.
I know, I'm just having trouble understanding how someone can sit at the desk and still to me, that's like having a desk in a landing. So I'm just having trouble understanding.
I understand.
Ming,
Thank you.
can you clarify what full-time staffing is for the hotel?
So we'll have an employee there 24 hours a day. They'll be full, and then there'll be maid service and things of that nature that will come and go, but there will be an employee there 24 hours a day for check-in and check-out.
Question, has the Saxony, does the developer still have ownership of the HOA, or has that been transferred to the owners?
Yeah, it has not been transferred over to the best of my knowledge.
Okay. And I'm assuming in those condo docs that there are some enforcement or regulations with the illegal STRs that could be performing in the building?
Well, I disagree that there are illegal STRs. There are provisions in those condo documents that lay out all of the rules and regulations. And I don't believe that there's anything with regards to the STRs that's in contravention of those condo documents, to the best of my knowledge.
Okay.
And Executive Director Rivers, there is an avenue for residents or people in the neighborhood to request safety and permits or just call for an inspection of any illegally operating STRs?
Sure, that would be to contact the STR Bureau and Department of Safety and Permits. They've recently beefed up their enforcement staff. So in connection with the new regulations that are rolling out in next month.
Great, thank you.
I have a question for staff.
Please.
We heard from one of the opponents asking us to consider factors and considerations beyond this property alone. In other words, to consider the whole neighborhood and whether it's saturated or not in issuing, in deciding on a conditional use. To what extent are we allowed to do that? That is to base a conditional use decision on factors that go beyond the boundaries of the particular property.
So I can take that. The staff and the commission absolutely have the ability to consider issues outside. I think with this particular application, the issue here is not that this isn't a 100-unit hotel, it's a 5-unit hotel. And that in the scheme of things, 5 units is going to be relatively mild compared to some more intensive uses.
Good, but the commission, we as commissioners can consider those type of factors.
Absolutely.
As well.
I mean, that's the purpose
Right.
of the conditional use process is to evaluate impact.
Good, thank you.
I have a question for staff as well. When a document was sent to you, were you satisfied? And I want to hear from you, like, how were you satisfied with the lobby?
I mean, it meets the requirement. That's about as, I don't know aesthetically, but it definitely meets the legal requirement.
No, I'm talking even physically, how can a desk and a chair actually fit in the lobby? Because the space requirements, like, it's a fire stair.
Mhm.
So if you are going to be in the middle, it's in the right of way of a fire emergency. I just don't know how a desk and a chair would be able to be accommodated in this right of way.
Can I interject? So those are the types of things that would be looked at building permit review. What our job is at the zoning level is to make sure that the components are presented and are there. If it turns out in the building permit review that there is some fire or life safety issue that is presented by the desk being where it is, they will be required to move it in accordance with whatever directive safety and permits requires. Those changes would be reviewed at the final development plan. So it may not look exactly like this, but it would be reviewed based on whether it was consistent with the original approval.
That's fine. I just want to make sure that there'll be an actual individual sitting at a desk and chair in some part of it.
And that's more of an operational
Yeah.
thing that would need to be enforced once it's open and operating.
Is that one of the provisos?
The proviso be that there's a lobby area. There's some, in the uses, in the use language, there is a stipulation that there has to be someone on site 24/7. But, the actual presence of a lobby is more so in the use language as opposed to a proviso.
It's implicit in the zoning regulation. So if it turns out that there is no one there, then it becomes a zoning violation that is actionable, regardless of whether there's a specific proviso.
Thank you.
What's the difference between today's? I know we deferred this from the end of May. What is the difference in today's application compared to last month?
The difference is the first floor plan wasn't included in the original packet,
Okay,
and they wanted to, I think there was a desire to see exactly where the placement of the lobby would be.
thank you.
I have a question for staff, but this might include the applicant as well. First of all, in the design review process, what about signage? I don't see a sign. Maybe I missed it for the hotel. Maybe this is an applicant question. Will,
Any signage would require approval typically. And I shouldn't say typically, but very frequently. Signage is done as a separate application from a conditional use application.
right, and just found it interesting in the renderings that most hotels have signs, and I don't know if you have a name yet for your hotel.
We do not, and we have not designed the sign as of yet. So we understood that we would have to get approval for that, but we have not designed it until this process was.
Has it been contemplated? I mean, that's interesting to think that you've thought about everything but a name.
The client isn't here, so I'm sure that has been contemplated and discussed with the architect team. I'm just not aware of the details on that. So I apologize. I don't have that for you this
Thank you.
afternoon.
Are there any other questions or motion?
So I'm gonna move to not follow staff recommendation. I'm gonna move for denial. And my reason is that if the consideration of the overall neighborhood and the proliferation of temporary dwelling units, whether they're STRs or hotel units or whatever. And we're allowed to take that into consideration. And so that tips the scale for me, and I'm going to move for denial.
And I'll second for those reasons, as well as it just doesn't seem like at the start of this, it was contemplated as a hotel, and there's so many other uses that it could be without a conditional use. So that, along with the neighbors' suggestions, are tipping the balance for me as well.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? We did get our machines up and running, so if you haven't logged in already, please do so. We'll vote on machines. Motion to deny passes. Next on the docket. 4223.
Zoning docket 04223 is a request for a zoning change from a light industrial district to an MU1 mixed use district for the property located at 2905 through 2941 Franklin Avenue in the St. Roch neighborhood. The site encompasses the entirety of square 1804 and measures approximately 85,347 square feet in area. Professional Funeral Services Incorporated is proposing a change in zoning to permit a funeral home to be constructed at the site. According to Google Maps images, the commercial structure that previously occupied the site remained vacant from 2018 until it was demolished in 2021. The applicant's proposal to develop the currently vacant property with a funeral home would bring the site back into commerce. The surrounding area includes a number of vacant lots, a storage facility, warehouse building, and lots that contain vacant and dilapidated structures. 2916 Franklin Avenue is located across the street from the subject site and is in common ownership with the petition property and is within the boundaries of the MU1 district. Staff notes that there is a small HURS district located near the subject parcel and that is mainly developed with single and two-family dwellings. The LI district contains intensive an intensive mix of primarily non-residential uses, while the proposed MU1 district is a less intensive district. While staff believes that the proposal is compatible with the zoning of nearby properties, since the proposal is not consistent with the master plan, the staff cannot recommend approval of the request.
Thank you. I have one card for Robbie Elisa. Come on up. State your name and address and you'll have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Robbie Eliezer from Trahan Architects, 701 Poitras Street. We asked City Planning Commission to support our application for a rezoning for the following reasons. In reviewing the CPC staff analysis, the majority of the review standards are found to either be met or not cause egregious impacts. The staff in the end does not look unfavorably upon the request. The change does not interfere with the intent of promoting the public health, safety, and welfare of the city. The surrounding area includes a number of vacant lots, a storage facility, warehouse buildings, and lots that contain vacant and dilapidated structures. As mentioned before, 2916 Franklin Avenue, located across the subject site and within the boundaries of the current MU1, is in common ownership with the petition site. It should be noted that the permitted and conditional commercial uses in the MU1 district are less intense than those of the LI district. The change in zoning would cause no egregious impacts to adjacent land use. The request is not a spot zone. The staff believes the proposal is compatible with the zoning of nearby property. Now, the proposed development meets the majority of the standards for zoning change outlined in the staff recommendation report, except for the single exception that it doesn't align with the industrial designation from the master plan. But this is the basis of our application to seek a zoning change. In terms of scale, intent, opportunity, and trend of development, the proposed amendment meets both the standards for zoning change as well as the inherent goals of the referenced master plan. The master plan was created in 2010 and amended in 2018 to guide the city's growth for the next 20 years. 13 years after the state, more than halfway through the master plan's intended reach, the triangular area bounded by I-10, Florida Avenue, and Peoples Avenue has seen little to no improvement or investment. As far as we are aware, there are no public plans to bring these investments or industrial developments to the area as intended to create jobs for the local community or improve the urban environment. Given this reality, we wanted to review the stated goals of the master plan, as we believe part of our proposal advances some of these goals. The proposed development in terms of addressing the framework goals, equity, the proposed development is led by a native New Orleanian businessman who will provide quality jobs for the local community. Resilience, the proposed amendment to MU1 has stricter requirements for resiliency than the current industrial designation under the current zoning ordinance. There's no change to the overall existing footprint of the city, and our proposal would not violate this either. Preservation of neighborhood residential character. The northeast portion of this triangular area bound by I-10, Florida Avenue, and Peoples Avenue is a historically residential neighborhood. The proposed development is more compatible with the scale of residential neighborhood than other potential industrial uses. Historically, funeral homes are part of residential areas. And lastly, the mixed-use land designations offer greater flexibility in areas that would benefit, and our subject site is one of these cases. We respectfully ask the City Planning Commission to support our application. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The only card that I have for the zoning docket. Are there any questions?
I want to ask a question of the applicant.
Sure.
So repeat what the intended use is.
Currently, the zoning ordinance doesn't allow funeral homes in a light industrial district, which is the current zoning. So seeking the zoning change to an MU1 would allow for the funeral home to come to the site.
So funeral home is neither conditional nor permitted in light industrial?
No, and what's interesting is funeral home isn't even defined in the zoning ordinance explicitly, but its component parts such as reception facility, office, for example, are permitted as of right in a light industrial. Funeral home is specifically named as allowed in an MU1. So our path forward appears to be the zoning change to the MU1, which.
And does this zoning change request include any property other than the property that your client owns and intends to put the funeral home on?
No, this is only for square 1804-2909 Franklin.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant?
I have a question for staff.
Thank you.
Are there any other designations that a funeral home would be allowed in? That are not mixed use? I'm just confused why a light industrial, why a funeral home is not allowed in a light industrial. I'm just wondering if this is something we should be considering for our master plan.
So funeral homes are a distinct use. I'm not sure if they are actually defined, but they are allowed in most of our mixed use areas. I don't know exactly the reason why they wouldn't be in our industrial districts, but when we adopted the new CZO, there was there was an effort to make sure that all of our industrial districts were for industrial uses in particular. A lot of like our old zoning ordinance was more cumulative, so everything in the less intense districts would be allowed in those districts. But that was one of the major changes for the industrial districts in the new CZO.
You know what the reason for that was? The reason?
Well, I believe it's because there's just a limited amount of area for industrial zoning in the city, and it was an effort to protect those areas because sometimes if you have, let's say, residential or even sometimes commercial uses that move into industrial areas, then those uses often will complain about some of the impacts of the existing industrial
Like
uses.
walkability.
I have one more question for staff. Is it correct that, so we heard from the applicant that it appeared that the only reason for the recommended denial was inconsistency with the master plan, and the basis of that was that the master plan designates this as light industrial and this would remove it as light industrial? That's the one hang up that staff had? Okay, okay.
Yes, that was on.
But in every other respect of, making things less intense, et cetera, staff was okay. It's just that one aspect.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'm going to follow up with that, and it had nothing to do with any of the environmental impacts as presented. There was a lot of information on environmental effects, and I guess it includes a crematory. Is that correct?
I don't know.
No?
That would probably be better answered by the
Okay.
applicant.
Yes, so funeral homes, as we understand it from city planning, include all mortuary functions. So we could have a crematorium on site, and that would be permitted as a right for the funeral home use. As part of the MVP process, there was neighborhood concerns to this regard as well. And our client provided many documents that shows the environmental impacts. Essentially, you don't even have to permit a crematory if you have just one on site. So if you're a funeral home and you're doing crematory services, it's considered so safe, you don't even have to permit the one. The permits are only triggered for two or more. And of course, the client would follow any sort of permitting requirements for crematory equipment.
Thank you. And back to staff. So that kind of answers my question. That was, as Mr. Steig said, it was not part of any reasoning behind the the recommendation of denial for this.
Right, all of the other standards were met.
Okay, thank you.
If I might add, Commissioner Brown, just a side note that the State Board of Embalmers and Funeral Directors regulates and oversees all funeral homes and crematories in the state. So they would also be regulated by that body.
Great, thank you.
I just have one question. So the property, it's already owned by the funeral home?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions, Commissioners?
Any other questions or a motion?
If there are no further questions, for zoning docket 04223, I'm gonna actually, although I appreciate staff's recommendation for denial, I'm gonna go against staff for approval of zoning docket 04223.
I second.
The motion by Commissioner Stewart, seconded by Commissioner Steig to go against staff report and approve zoning docket 4223. it appears that we have lost our Granicus again, so.
I want to
Do a
make
roll
the
call.
comment that this might be a use that was one of those uses that was overlooked, or we haven't really looked at it clearly because, or not clearly, but in depth, because, you know, as funeral practices and cremation become different over time, and as they are actually changing a lot, we should really think of this as a light industrial use or a little bit more of a environmentally intensive use than should be allowed in a residential area. So I really think that with the motion that has been proposed.
Thank you.
And I might add just in support of the motion that there's plenty of other property surrounding this that's zoned industrial, if there were ever going to be industrial development. Since it's zoned light industrial to encourage industrial, but on the other hand, there's nothing going on there. And it's really the developer's risk, because somebody can come and put a cement plant next to him, and maybe that adversely impacts him. But until that happens, I'd rather see this property put back into commerce.
Thank you. And with that, I'll call the question. Commissioner Alexander,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Flick, yes. Commissioner Jordan is absent. Commissioner Joshi Gupta,
Yes.
Commissioner Stieg,
Yes.
Commissioner Stewart,
Yes.
Commissioner Witry.
Yes.
Commissioner Lund, yes.
Commissioner Lund.
Yeah.
Thank you. Motion passes. Okay, with that, next zoning docket 4323.
Zoning docket 4323 is a request for a conditional use to permit retail sales of packaged alcoholic beverages in a CBD 5 urban core neighborhood lower intensity mixed use district. The petition site is located at 929 Howard Street. The existing site previously used as headquarters for the iHeartMedia radio station and is proposed to be leased by Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits as an alcoholic beverage wholesale purveyor. The staff's analysis of this application focuses on how alcoholic beverages will not be sold to the general public and therefore does not present the same concerns as a retailer that is requesting an ABO license to sell to the public. The proposed sale of alcoholic beverages is sensible in that it aligns with the commercial purpose of the zoning designation and is not inherently different from the sale of other food or drink products. Therefore, the staff recommends approval of zoning docket 04323, subject to one proviso.
Thank you. I have two cards. First is Georgia Ainsworth.
Good afternoon, Georgia Ainsworth on behalf of the applicant, New Orleans Property Partners LLC. Yes, as the staff reports noted, this is not going to be a property that will be used for general alcohol sales to the public. Essentially, the proposed lessee of the building, Southern Glazers Wine and Spirit, is a licensed alcoholic beverage wholesaler. The lessee plans to use the building primarily as an office space. It's a 3-story building. The third floor and the second floor will be office space. The first floor will be primarily office space as well, except a small portion of it we'd like to use as a wholesale, wholesales to our customers. So essentially, those people also all have retail alcoholic beverage permits. Direct warehouse sales would be sales of alcoholic beverages to licensed alcoholic dealers only. Southern Glazers is prohibited by law from selling alcoholic beverages to the general public, and there'll be no sales to the general public at all. The main warehousing facility will actually be located elsewhere. It's just, we're only asking for this permit so that we can use about 2,500 square feet of a 17,000 square foot building for direct to wholesale consumer purchases, just so they can, purchase them on site, small batch, so they can try it out before they buy the larger amounts. No one has expressed any opposition to this request over the course of our NPP notification efforts, and we agree with the City Planning Commission's staff report to recommend approval, and that they found that all criteria were met. There would be no adverse impacts, and that it was consistent with the master plan.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question of the applicant before she leaves?
Sure.
Of course.
So you said wholesale?
Yes, so it's a
So the-
wholesale alcohol distributor.
Right, so the request says conditional use to permit the retail sale.
Yes,
So
and
do
that's,
we need to change that language?
well, it's because that's the only criteria. The wholesale accessory sale of alcohols for wholesale distributors is not actually addressed in the master plan. So we had to apply for a conditional use permit under the retail sales.
So is are the limits that you just expressed, though, that it would be sold? I realize legally you can't sell to the public, but are the other limits that you just expressed in the application in provisos that limit of 2,500 feet? And the fact that it would be sold to wholesale, are those in provisos, staff,
It's
in
not,
the conditional use?
it wouldn't be in the provisos for this zoning docket, for the report, for this report, because the wholesale falls into the retail conditional use.
But
So-
she said they were gonna limit it to 2,500 feet out of a 17,000 foot building. Is that limit I'd like to see the limitations that she voluntarily expressed put in writing.
It's
in
on the, yeah, it's
conditional
on the
use.
site plan of the ground floor is where the wholesale retail will be. And so there's a service bar and a tasting area for people to come in and purchase. The other two floors are used for office space, or that's designated on the site plan.
So I think what she's saying is that the development plan would govern. So if they tried to expand beyond what was shown in the development plan, then that would be in violation of the approval.
Good, okay, thanks.
Are there any other questions for the applicant?
Consumers are not coming here. It's actually sales of alcoholic beverages to wholesales.
It's, yeah,
I would-
so we'd have maybe like a bar restaurant customer. The restaurant would be the customer and they would come to us and we would sell them. You know, we'd provide them with options for stocking their supplies and they could maybe buy a box of special scotch or something so they could try it in the restaurant and see if it was selling. It's not so that someone can just walk in off the street and be like, I want to taste some scotch and drink it. It's for retail customers.
Okay.
Great, thank you. That's my only card in support. I have one card in opposition, Michael Duplantier.
Yes, Michael Duplantier, 820 Barone Street with the Lafayette Square Association. I submitted an opposition because frankly, I'm a little confused about this. The NPP information suggested what we just heard, that this would be a wholesale operation only. And other than that, I certainly have, even with that, we have no problem with it. And we certainly welcome the new business to the neighborhood. But on the other hand, we have, for about 50 years now, we've opposed every single application for packaged alcoholic beverage in our neighborhood in CBD 5. So I missed some of the discussion, but I really would like some assurance that that's not what's going to happen here. I know, Mr. Sieg, you mentioned about provisos. I didn't quite understand the answer to that. Will the provisos protect us against the guy walking in off the street buying a beer? I know that's not their intention, and I certainly appreciate that, but I'd like to have some assurance.
So if that's a question directed to me, I
don't know that I can direct it to you, but you raised that question and.
Right, and I'm gonna address that. I'm gonna ask a question later to address that with staff, but I think as my understanding, it's not in the provisos as of the moment.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ainsworth, if you wanted to say anything as a rebuttal.
Yeah, just to address that, Southern Glazers, they do not sell direct to consumer. They sell direct to wholesale retail customers. So that would alleviate, I hope, the concern that it become like a restaurant or bar. That's not what we're asking, and that's not our intended plan.
Can I ask you a question while you're there? May I ask her a question while she's there? So my concern is that if you sold the property, the conditional use stays with the property and someone else could take over the property and the conditional use allows retail sales. And I realize that there's no specific conditional use to allow wholesale sales. So I realize that you've done correctly, so to speak. But if we were to add a proviso limiting it to wholesale sales, would you have any objection to that?
No, because that's what our intended purpose.
That's what I assume. And you all, I realize you cannot sell at retail.
We cannot.
But you could sell the property. That's my concern.
Yeah, and I understand that, and just given the nature of what the intended purpose is.
Right,
Is the office, sort of headquarters, so to speak.
right.
You know, we're not going anywhere for a long time.
That's what
But
I
I do
figured.
understand the
So I figured you wouldn't have any objection, because
No,
obviously what you're intending is, you know, we understand it. Okay,
thank
thanks.
you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for staff or a motion?
I make a motion to recommend approval of zoning docket 043-23, subject to one proviso.
What, are we adding the proviso to limit it?
I don't know if that's necessary. I wanted to ask the staff if that was necessary. Add that.
I think the intent was because it would say the conditional use would stay with the property. So in the event that it was sold, it would still be for retail sales.
For wholesale.
So the idea was to add a proviso to limit it to wholesale. If you're amenable to that.
Is that, I will second if that isn't an added proviso.
I want to ask the staff if this permit is with the property. What happens if they move what happens if they move out?
So, yeah, so retail sales would be for alcohol sales, like whether it's wholesale or
Okay,
to
so
the
we
public
can,
would stick with the property, and what Commissioner Stieg is
Let's
sort
have
of
it.
suggesting is that a proviso would limit that to wholesale only, and that would stay with the property.
perfect. Let's add that proviso. So let's recommend approval of zoning docket 043-23, subject to two provisos. So the second proviso being that the wholesale nature of this business stays with this property.
Second.
Is there any discussion? No, I'll call the question. Commissioner Alexander? Yes. Commissioner Brown?
Yes.
Commissioner Flick? Yes. Commissioner Jordan?
Yes.
Commissioner Joshi Gupta?
Yes.
Commissioner Lund?
Yes.
Commissioner Sieg?
Yes.
Commissioner Stewart?
Yes.
Commissioner Witry?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. Next up is zoning docket 4423.
This request is by City Council Motion Number M23-146 for a text amendment to modify Article 24, Section 24.15.c of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance. To permission existing and future non-historic businesses the right to maintain and modify a designated classic sign to reflect that of a non-historic business's name of a descriptive language and color. The proposed text amendment will add a new overlay district to Article 18, Section 18.24 overlay zoning districts of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance to permit 2 JAGS classic non-conforming signage at 823 Decatur Street to be altered to no longer identify 2 JAGS, the tenant that occupied the property for over 100 years, but rather to identify a new business that is to occupy the property. Because the classic signing regulations in the zoning ordinance are intended to ensure the preservation of historically significant signage, the alternation of 2 JAG signage is not allowed under the regulations. Thus, council motion proposes that if a classic signage designee were to move, the new business in the prior location would then be able to maintain and modify the existing signage. Presently, there are 35 classic sign designations throughout the city. As written, the current regulations protect the integrity of original and historic signage, while the proposed amendment seeks to extend historic properties to establishments that do not meet historic, original, or significant designations as outlined in current regulations. Thus, a proposed change could potentially enable the destruction of every existing classic sign by allowing the modification of any classic sign to identify a new business rather than the historically identified business by the sign, which is at odds with the intent of the classic sign provisions. Staff therefore recommend denial.
Thank you. I have a number of cards. Let's start first with an information card. Nathan Lott.
Yes, good afternoon. Nathan Lott here on behalf of Preservation Resource Center, 923 Chapatulas. I checked information only in part because I don't really have a dog in the fight on the 2 JAG sign. But I am certainly concerned, we are certainly concerned with a citywide change. So I think we're very much in line with what the staff have just stated. And my comments in writing were to that effect that, you know, when we talk about paint color on a building, generally we're okay with people changing that. We're always telling them, you know, it's okay, unless maybe you're in the French Quarter, then double check.
But when we talk about the colors on a sign, that's a pretty distinctive feature. And you talk about the wording on a sign, that's another really distinctive feature. So you can change the wording and the coloring. You can change a lot about a classic sign. So it seems to kind of be at odds with the intent. What I would suggest maybe as an alternative would be to have some type of design review process. We've already got them in HDLC, VCC, CPC has a design review process and specific to signs. So maybe there's a middle way here where some alterations can be allowed when businesses change hands, but not just a carte blanche, which seems to be the concern with this. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Ike Spears. Please just state your name and address and you'll have 2 minutes.
Yes, members of the commission, my name is Ike Spears, 909 Poydras, Suite 1825. I'm here to urge the commission to reject the recommendation of denial by the staff for the following reasons. First and foremost, this is a very unique situation, unlikely to be duplicated in the future, but the Vucare Commission has allowed Two Jacks Restaurant to recreate an historic sign approximately 4 blocks away. So now you have a situation not like Falstaff that's out of business or K&B that's out of business, but you have a situation where there's a Two Jacks Restaurant, historic restaurant, relocated, and they were allowed to recreate their classic sign. 4 blocks away, you have the old Two Jacks with the old classic sign, which is begging for a new tenant. People who want to put businesses back into commerce recognize that there's a certain value to being able to put your name on your business. And getting a new business to move into the old location when they cannot alter the Two Jack signs is just counterproductive. If we're concerned about not having blighted and abandoned buildings in the quarter, I think this is a unique situation that could be narrowly tailored to only impact the Two Jack sign. I'll also say that there was at least some discussion when the Vucare Commission approved the second sign as to what would happen to the old sign. And at least there was an inference during that discussion that the owner of the building would be allowed to make some alterations to the old sign. Now, that obviously is not what has happened. And now we're in a very unique situation where we have two Two Jack signs 4 to 5 blocks from one another, which also creates confusion, by the way. When tourists and customers are looking for Two Jacks, if they see the old sign first, they're going to go in there and it may not be Two Jacks. It may be a gumbo shop. It may be any number of things. But again, in terms of what makes sense, common sense, and what's good for the economy, what's good for the French Quarter, to narrowly tailor a situation which would allow the old Two Jack signs not to be significantly altered, but simply change the name from Two Jacks to the name of the occupant who's in the building now, and you still have a classic Two Jack sign 4 blocks away. Thank you.
Thank you. Ali Conley.
Good afternoon. My name is Ali Conley. I'm at 909 Poydras. I just want to echo what Mr. Spears was saying. This is kind of a common sense situation. We're not trying to destroy all of the classic signs in the city. It's a situation where there's two Two Jack signs essentially on the either side of Jackson Square, and it's confusing for tourists. It's frustrating for the owner of the property where the old Two Jack signs exist, because now you're in a situation where you can't lease this to anyone that doesn't want to be there without their own name on the sign. Essentially, the current regulations don't speak to this situation. So in my take, it's kind of a first impression. The proposed amendment would only allow an owner of a classic sign to change the sign when a new business moves and takes a duplicate sign with them. We're not opposed to, as Mr. Spears said, we're not opposed to tailoring this further to where it only impacts Two Jacks, or maybe only impacts something within a mile radius or a certain block radius. But again, it's a nonsensical situation to have 2 identical signs within 4 blocks of each other. It's confusing for tourists. It just doesn't make sense. We're not trying to destroy the classic signs in the city. We're trying to there is I guess what I'm trying to say is there is a two-jack sign that's been allowed to exist 4 blocks away. So we're asking the CPC to reject the staff recommendation and to allow for this text amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Mueller. Chris Young. Those are all the cards that I have for in support. Michael Duplantier.
I have 3 matters today. Michael Duplantier, 820 Barone Street. I had submitted a statement of opposition to this application personally, and the Louisiana Landmark Society, who I'm representing today, had also submitted a letter of opposition. I believe, if I remember, both of these letters were submitted before the staff report was issued. And frankly, we're here to reaffirm our opposition to this application. There's a lot to be said about this, but frankly, the staff report is excellent, and we support the staff report of opposition. I don't think we could state it much better than they already have. So we reaffirm our opposition to this application. I would add one thing, though. The changes here, at least based on the application, are not minor. You're talking about changing the name, of course, as was discussed, but also the descriptive language, and I'm not sure what that means, honestly. It could be anything. And the color. And when you do that, and when you update the graphics and you update the technology involved, you basically got a brand new sign here. So this is not a good policy for the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nathan Chapman.
Good afternoon. I'm Nathan Chapman. I'm president of the Viewcray Property Owners, Residents and Associates, which we call VC4 for short. Live at 715 Ursulines. I also ask you to go with the staff report and to reject this application. The good news is there are hundreds of businesses in the French Quarter that are successful, that operate under the current sign regulations. And I hope the future tenants of this building will also be successful, and that sign should not be critical to their success. You know, it's my understanding that when Tujague's moved down the street, they wanted to take that sign with them, and the landlord would not allow them to. So if there's confusion, that's the creation of the people who own the building. And so they could keep, maybe they're sentimental and wanted to keep that sign, in which case then we shouldn't deface it and make it some brand new business. If they're not sentimental, then I'm wondering, oh, maybe they just saw an opportunity for a loophole to have a really big sign, there'd be an extra feature, you know, for their future tenant. And I think we either do with these few iconic, already selected individual signs, or they can go with the same regulations all the other businesses follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony Marino.
Good afternoon, Anthony Marino. I reside at 1028 Bourbon Street. I am also a member and on the board of the Viewcray Property Owners Resident Associates, as Nathan just mentioned. I'm also second vice president on the board of trustees for the Louisiana Landmark Society. I'm here. This is not just an issue with regard to the Viewcray, but it's citywide, as Nathan Lott mentioned as well. And that's the concern. My understanding when this was proposed, and I just want to commend the staff in the sense of what it looked at. This particular ordinance was done almost decades ago to protect historic signs. That some of these signs are not even, that are presently out there, are not in operation of a business. There's a listing, I'm gonna give you just a few that we all know of. The Blue Plate is one. Blue Plate doesn't manufacture there. Bud's Broiler is now gone, but it's still allowed as a sign. Dixie Brewery, Falstaff. The Half Moon is operation, but it's not operating the Half Moon as I remember as a child. Cobb's Restaurant is no more. The Half Shell Piccadilly's Lounge is vacant. And then you've got the Pearl also vacant. I looked at some things. What they're trying to do is preserve signs that were in existence and preserve the culture and the cuisine advertisements that were there. If you look at the definitions for eligibility that were mentioned in the staff report in particular, and then Mr. Duplantier also mentioned, if they allow this sign to take place, you're going to change the color, the language, and the description. And as I understand it, and doing my research, that the opportunity to remove that sign to the 400 block of Decatur Street was an attempt by the owners of that restaurant and was denied. This statute, this ordinance was meant to protect the classic signs that were there, and specifically it doesn't allow for alterations or modifications, and that was very clear in the staff recommendation. It says that if it's older than 25 years, it can allow an exact replica, which is in fact what happened on the 400 block of Decatur. And also the original sign can be restored or manufactured in another place. But it was a question of, for instance, you get an example of the Sanger Theater, that marquee that's there. I don't remember that particular marquee when I was growing up because there was a different one. But they looked back and researched and there was one. So they duplicated what was original at the time. And that's what this the whole purpose of this particular ordinance was to preserve what was there. And a number of businesses. I should all mention that the 800 block location, in addition to the banner sign that they were attempting to change, there are also two other signs, one that says bar and one says Tujague's. Perhaps those can be removed and replaced. They didn't address that particular one. So again, we commend the staff and its recommendations. It didn't meet the standards and criteria. They said for I think 5 out of the 7, they said they were denied. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron Holmes.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Erin Holmes. I am Executive Director of VC Pora, and as noted from other representatives of my organization, we support the staff report in opposition to the text amendment. As noted in the staff report, the proposed change was introduced to accommodate a reconfiguration of the iconic original Tujague sign, but if approved, it could allow for any of the other 34 classically designated signs citywide to be altered to reflect a new name, colors, other descriptive language, which is arguably the main identifying information of a classic sign. The purpose and intent of the classic sign designation is to highlight and preserve historic signage that is unique and significant to the city. A mock-up of the proposed change, which is in your packet, it was in the letter that I sent, reflects a donut shop chain from Portland. So it's not so unique or significant to the city, but I'm sure they're delicious. As noted previously, this is a very unique situation. We have not visited this before, but unique situations are what create precedents. A new tenant for the location will not be prevented from introducing a new sign for a new business, even if the existence of the original Tujague sign is there. But this amendment will jeopardize all of the unique identifiers of our cultural heritage around that are signs that are designated as our classic signs. And it will also create a loophole for signage to bypass the regulations of their underlying zoning districts in the future. So respectfully, we ask that you deny this text amendment.
Thank you. Nikki Zwolinski.
Nikki Savinsky, 1011 St. Philip, French Quarter citizens. Basically want to reiterate everything that has already been said. A classic sign is a classic sign, and allowing someone to make a sign and say, hey, it's classic is kind of antithetical to what we're trying to do here and preserve history. And as was already mentioned, the Tujagues did try to take their sign and they were denied that opportunity. So the solution, if there is confusion, would be to give Tujagues their sign. So we support the staff report and we hope that you will deny this.
Thank you. Those are all the cards I have. Are there any questions for staff in the commission?
Did I understand correctly just now, there is an option that the owner of this property give Tujague this sign, and then they could put up a sign that would, as long as it passed what's required in the French Quarter. Is that correct?
So basically, and this did come before the text change that allowed the new Tujague sign to be created, did come before the City Planning Commission. The City Planning Commission did express concerns about this exact scenario. If I understand your question, there is no way that the city can compel the owner of the former Tujague site to give the sign to the new location and move it with the restaurant. My understanding is that the restaurant requested and was denied the ability to take the sign with them. So that's why they believe that that sign was so iconic to that restaurant that was at that location for a century, that it was important for them to replicate it at their new location. When the sign was designated, and the View Correct Commission designated the sign or nominated the sign to be a classic sign. And it was because of that identification with that restaurant at that location for a century. So our recommendation is twofold. One is that in this particular instance, the alteration of the sign would undermine the very reason why it was made a classic sign to begin with, because it takes away that connection with the iconic restaurant. And then the second issue is because of the way it's worded, it would apply to every sign across the city would allow those alterations. And a lot of those signs are on properties that are being operated very successfully by other businesses that those signs don't identify with. So that's the basis of our recommendation. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, it did. And so it's already done, basically. I mean, it's not like there's an option any longer because this decision was made and yeah, that's over with. But thank you for explaining the staff report. Thank you.
Any other questions? Or motion?
I think it's unfortunate that Two Jazz was not able to take their sign or the sign removed and taken with them, but this is just one of many. I live uptown, so I see Mackenzie's and Creole Creamery, very successful business. There's many other businesses. I think the signage is part of a historic fabric and we need to preserve it.
There was a comment about from Mr. Lott about the creation of some sort of design review process. What do we do here at the CPC? Where would that happen? There was a design review process.
If I understand what Mr. Lott was suggesting was that a better alternative than to allow a blanket ability to alter would be to have it, if the desire was to have some process that it have a design review component. Is that correct, Mr. Lott? And I see him nodding his head. I think what we do right now is we say, no, classic signs can't be altered. But if it were to go that path, we have a design advisory committee. This particular sign is in the View Correct Commission in the View Correct. So I'm sure that the View Correct would be an appropriate location. A lot of the other signs are in historic HDLC districts. So I'm sure we could figure out a way to, if the council or if you all were inclined to go a different path.
Do we have a recent study on signs? Has there been a study?
No, I think this is a provision that I think someone mentioned that this classic sign designation has been around for a long time. It predates the current CZO. And so we incorporated the language from the old CZO on classic signs into the new CZO. And there hasn't been much activity with classic signs since the new CZO came into place. I think this is one of the first instances where there may have been one or two others since 2015, but it's not something that comes up frequently.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Question for staff. Is there another way to, without a text change to, I guess, accomplish having two signs, two similar signs within that close of a block radius? If we look at any other options other than just making the text change?
What it appears that the motion is requesting is just to make changes to classic signs CUI to allow every classic sign to be changed should there be a new business at the location. So specifically using two JAGs as the most, I guess, the motivation behind the request. There's essentially no limitations per se on, I guess, how many two JAG signs there can be, as the original sign that is at the Decatur site is the original sign. And then I guess the last request that came through was for them to move that sign to their new location. But the nature of the request is specifically dealing with every classic sign being able to be changed and amended to reflect a different business that is not classic or historic.
I was gonna go ahead and make a motion to agree with staff recommendation for denial.
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Winfrey, seconded by Commissioner Brown. There's no discussion. Call the question. Commissioner Alexander,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Flick, yes. Commissioner Jordan,
Yes.
Commissioner Joshi Gupta,
Yes.
Commissioner Lunn,
Yes.
Commissioner Stieg,
Yes.
Commissioner Stewart,
Yes.
Commissioner Witry.
Yes.
Motion passes. Motion to deny passes. Next is zoning docket 4523.
Zoning docket 4523 is a request by City Council Motion M23162 to modify Article 18, Section 18.30, the University Area Off-Street Parking Overlay District, the intent of which is to require off-street vehicular parking for certain increases in the number of existing bedrooms and bathrooms, and to expand the area of applicability to the area previously covered by the first iteration of the University Area Off-Street Parking Overlay, but with the addition of several neighborhoods, including Fontainebleau and Broadmoor. The expanded area would affect just under 6,000 additional parcels. This area is currently controlled by the University Area Off-Street Parking Interim Zoning District, which was adopted on October 6th, 2022. This interim zoning district was implemented as a temporary measure while the University Area Off-Street Parking Overlays regulations could be modified. The staff recommends deferral to the June 27th, 2023 City Planning Commission hearing in order to provide staff additional time to collect information and data.
Thank you. I'm looking for a deferral to the June 27th meeting.
I'll make a motion for deferral of zoning docket 04523.
Second, Commissioner Stewart.
Commissioner Stewart. Motion by Commissioner Jordan, seconded by Commissioner Stewart. There's no discussion. Commissioner Alexander,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Flick, yes. Commissioner Jordan,
Yes.
Commissioner Joshi Gupta,
Yes.
Commissioner Lunn,
Yes.
Commissioner Stieg,
Yes.
Commissioner Stewart,
Yes.
Commissioner Witry.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next is zoning docket 4623,
Madam Chair, can you mark me as recused?
as noted. Commissioner Stieg has recused himself.
Zoning docket 4623 is a request for a text amendment to allow broadcasting studios as permitted uses in the CBD5 district. So staff believes broadcasting studios would not be any more intensive than office spaces, and that they also generally positively impact the community. So therefore, staff recommends approval of this request.
Thank you. I have one card. Michael Duplantier. Oh. Not here. Thought he wanted to speak 3 times. I have no cards on this zoning docket. Are there any questions for staff?
Just a note, I think that's the shortest staff report I've ever heard. Nice to have one of those. I like the script.
Madam Chair, if there are no other speakers, I'll move for approval for zoning docket 04623.
And I'll second.
Commissioner Brown, second. Commissioner Stewart made the motion for approval. There's no discussion. I'll call the question. Commissioner Alexander,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Flick, yes. Commissioner Jordan,
Yes.
Commissioner Joshi Gupta,
Yes.
Commissioner Lunn,
Yes.
Commissioner Stewart,
Yes.
Commissioner Witry. Commissioner Stieg has recused himself. Motion passes. Next up is the firearm sales study.
City Council Motion M23163 requests the City Planning Commission to conduct a study and make recommendations regarding the addition of firearm sales as a use separate and distinct from retail good establishments, and to make recommendations regarding potential zoning changes that would prohibit the sale of firearms within 1,000 feet of educational facilities. Motion M 23-163 was brought forward by the New Orleans City Council to consider land use regulations similar to those proposed by Jefferson Parish's Council's Resolution number 141684, which created interim development standards with the intent of evaluating and amending regulations related to firearm commercial establishments and firearm-free zones, establishing interim development standards during the study. The scope of work of the firearms sales study will similarly include the review of the legal parameters and best practices that would either prohibit or enable recommendations to move forward. For instance, Louisiana Revised Statute 1796 preempts the city of New Orleans from enacting ordinances that are more restrictive than Louisiana statutes governing the sale, purchase, possession, or ownership of firearms. Louisiana Revised Statute 1495.6 establishes firearm-free zones which prohibit the possession of a firearm within 1,000 feet of a school campus. However, this provision does not apply to commercial establishments which are permitted by law to have firearms. The City Planning Commission is responsible for creating and maintaining a map of all firearm-free zones throughout the city. City Council Motion M 23-163 doesn't explicitly state a timeframe in which to hold a public hearing. However, the City Planning Commission generally holds public hearings within 90 days of the passage of the motion and completes the study within 180 days of the passage of the motion. The public hearing for the firearm sales study will be postponed until the July 11th, 2023 regular meeting. The postponement will allow time for the staff to contact stakeholders to encourage greater engagement during the public hearing. Revised significant dates and deadlines for the firearms study are as follows. But please note these dates are subject to change. April 20th, 2023, motion M 23-163 was adopted by City Council. July 11th, 2023, City Planning Commission public hearing, which is postponed at today's meeting. September 26, 2023, draft study will be made available to the public. October 2nd, 2023, deadline for written comments. October 10th, 2023, City Planning Commission consideration of the study. October 17th, 2023, deadline for the study and CPC recommendation to be forwarded to City Council. After the recommendation is forwarded to City Council, the next steps are at the discretion of City Council. Changes to the comprehensive zoning ordinance are typically proposed through a City Council motion directing the CPC to consider a text amendment to the CZO. If such a motion is passed by the City Council, the CPC will prepare a staff report, hold a public hearing, and make a recommendation to the City Council. To approve any CZO changes, the City Council will have to hold its own public hearing and approve an ordinance. Any changes to City Code will require a separate ordinance by City Council. Written comments should be addressed to the Executive Director of the City Planning Commission or emailed to cpcinfo@nola.gov. No action is required at this time.
Thank you. Did I hear that correctly, that we can't have any regulations that are more prohibitive than the state as it relates to firearms?
That's correct.
That was my question too. So is anything that would be contemplated in the study going to propose any sort of legislative agenda, or is this just going to be within the constraints of what we're left with?
So let me comment on that. Given our staff issues, we tried to, or we suggested that maybe the study isn't necessary at this time, or that it may be premature. But we did have a conversation with the council member staff, and they explained that some of the issues that they wanted us to look at. And one of them was, right now, my understanding is that the sale of firearms it falls into the larger general land use description of sale of retail sales. Sale of retail sales is not allowed in every land use district. So theoretically, we already have land use restrictions on the sale of firearms. And I guess what we will be doing is looking at other communities, seeing what best practices are. Part of the reason for wanting to postpone this meeting is that we just met with the council member's office in the past week. But we did think it would be helpful to you all to get some of the local criminal justice stakeholders or crime advocate stakeholders to come here and to speak to you all on things, their expertise that we don't have as City Planning Commission staff. So given all that, I think there are some avenues that we can explore. I think, it's been suggested that maybe we kind of create a recommendation around how we can change state legislation, but I'm not really sure that that's in our wheelhouse to do. We can make recommendations about what we can do within the existing laws.
You know where we would go to get a copy of the existing laws? Anybody?
They're in the back of your Granicus packet.
Oh,
Yeah, so we included
Thank
the two laws that I referenced
Okay.
there.
And in the meeting that you're proposing with stakeholders, they would address this further, I would imagine. This meeting is primarily to assist us.
Yeah, this is for informational purposes, but we're hopefully having another one where people will come. But we need more time to work on getting that list of stakeholders from the city council and from relative departments. We're already in discussion with the health department to help us.
Yeah, appreciate that. I like to see the stakeholder representation as wide.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? And there's no movement or motion. This is just information. Thank you. Last is subdivision ratifications.
This ratification includes applications that have not yet been certified by the staff and where the commission is ratifying the staff determination that the application may be reviewed and approved administratively.
The staff, the list of subdivisions deferred from the May 23rd meeting and the list of new subdivisions for the June 13th meeting.
A second.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no discussion. Call the question. Commissioner Alexander?
Yes.
Commissioner Brown?
Yes.
Commissioner Flick? Yes. Commissioner Jordan?
Yes.
Commissioner Joshi Gupta?
Yes.
Commissioner Lunn?
Yes.
Commissioner Stieg?
Yes.
Commissioner Stewart?
Yes.
Commissioner Witry?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. That concludes our business for today. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
Your ability to share our meeting.
I know.
Thank
It's been so fun. Thank you.
Adjourn.
Thank you.